What's up, Bandit family? It's Angel here yet again. And today I'm here with Ed from University Drive. What's up,
Hello.
Ed? How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing so good. University Drive, they're Scranton-based alt rock band, and recently, earlier this year, they released their album Heal. It's the third album since 2019, coming after Clear. And yeah, I want to dive into that album because it's you are first and foremost, you're a great songwriter, storyteller, and you everything you write from like what I've
Ah,
heard, it just comes from the heart and comes
thank
from a
you.
deep place. And that album, it really feels kind of like that stages of loss and grief
Hmm.
and all of that. So yeah, I I have questions. I have things
Absolutely.
to ask you. This album, it was like a 2 year thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of writing it all out there, producing it, writing it. And I kind of want to ask you first and foremost of kind of getting your perspective, like where it all began. I want to hear from like the start of it all.
So basically what happened was I always, anytime I even talk about the band, I always kind of have to backtrack a little bit.
Mhm.
Um when we how the band kind of started was I had this other band called the Social State. And
Right.
we were banned for about 7 or 8 years, and that band ended prematurely, sadly. And then I started University Drive, just be kind of like a solo collective project almost. um, and my original idea for the band was to more or less just go in and make records with no expectation, no preconceived notions or anything like that, and kind of just play shows sparingly, like whenever a good opportunity announced itself or something interesting. And I would just get the people, like find friends who were in other bands or whatnot and have them fill the gaps. So we put out this record called On Off Reset, which was just me, except for one song that was I brought like the Social State guys kind of reconnected, and we did a song together. And then that record ended up kind of starting the process of finding the real band,
Mhm.
like because this whole thing's been like, now it's a 7 year process of where the band has kind of landed. So we made, after On Off Reset, we made this record called Clear. And when we were starting that record, there was no real template or anything like that. It was more so just to get in a room and just start kind of working on tunes. And in the middle of all that, my mom unexpectedly just had a heart attack and passed away, and it was insanity. And meanwhile, every other member of the band, our then drummer Steve Martin, and our still now guitar player Angelo, and our old bass player John, like everybody had their own crisis, like all happen like right at the same time while we were kind of starting to make Clear.
Mhm.
um and we all kind of just stepped away for, I don't know how long it was, but it was quite some time that we just stepped away from making music because it was just too fucking heavy, like way too crazy. And then we came back together to kind of start doing things, and all of a sudden the songs obviously like just had a lot more emotional weight. And because I don't know, when you go through something heavy like grief, it your head just kind of spirals, and that was my first real grapple with it at like 31 years old. Like, I mean, I'd had, everybody deals with some form of it, but to have like somebody you're super close to just be like, they're gone, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it heavily ended up in the writing, and I started to kind of think of like, how could I make a record that sounds the way that it feels inside my head, like
Mm.
all the questions and all the confusion and the reaching towards ideologies and then kind of rejecting them, all that shit. um and so we made that record. And that was, I've said this before, but I was kind of planning on that being like the last big production I'd worked on where, went and go and spend a bunch of money and spend a bunch of time, like just focus on singles and here and there, whatever. In the midst of all that, I'm sorry if this is such a long drawn out
Oh,
answer.
you have the floor. You have
Okay.
the floor, so you're good.
Okay, cool. What's it called? In the midst of all that, I'm randomly at work one day and I get a message from Nick Coyle, who's the guitar player in the band Cold.
Yeah.
And they reach out to us and say like, hey, would you guys have any interest in, coming out on tour with us and opening up? And I was just like, what? Like years ago, my old bands, we always toured, but they were like, DIY, playing the VFW, playing for the door and, hoping maybe 15 people are there,
Mhm.
like 20. Oh my God, great night,
Yeah.
so that happened and they brought us on tour and it was like a dream come true. Never could have expected anything like that to happen. And when we got home from that tour, we were just super energized and we kind of started talking to this guy, Paul Smith, about going down to his studio and maybe starting to record together here and there. And
Mhm.
we're like, yeah, okay, cool. Like just to kind of keep momentum moving.
Mhm.
And when we started, right when we were making plans to start recording, the pandemic hit.
Mhm. Of
And
course.
then so yeah, so we were all very like, I don't want to say I was scared, but I was nervous as far as like the right way to approach all that stuff because you don't want to get anybody sick or anything, especially when you didn't know anything about anything right at the beginning.
Mhm.
So we just kind of postponed all that stuff. And then finally, so that's the beginning of like where we've said it's like a 2-year journey to make the record. The
Mhm.
beginning of it was really like 6 months of going like, is it all right to kind of be in a room together yet?
Right. Absolutely.
So through that whole time frame, I decided that, well, being that I can't be in a room with my band and being that I can't go and play shows and do anything, I'm just gonna write songs and demo songs.
Mhm.
Now, when I was in that other band, A Social State, we had made this record with a producer and did the whole, big producer thing. And I always look back at that time like half so happy and so grateful. And the other half, I kind of kicked myself
Mhm.
because I didn't show up as a song with songs. Like I came in there with 6 songs and then wrote the other 6 or 7, like trying to complete the record. So I didn't have a lot of material. And I still listen back to that record. It's called How to Get to Heaven. And I always think like half of that record is my favorite stuff I've ever made and will never make anything up to that level. And the other half I think is just like the biggest miss personally, not from the band, like from myself. Uh, so I made it a point that being that I had this time, that there was no way in hell that I was going to let myself just willy-nilly go to the studio with like, oh yeah, here's the 10 songs it's going to be.
Mhm.
So for basically 6 months to a year, I just wrote and demoed songs up until I had, I don't know, 55 to 60 demos, not like just audio recordings in your phone, like fleshed out, intricate kind of demos. And when we were able to go down to the studio, we just started going, all right, well, of these 60, these 30 are cool. And of these 30, let's track these 20. And of these 20, let's pick these 12 that will be the record. And
Mhm.
the crazy part, like going back to talking about like the themes of the record and how it kind of evolved, like there was no where clear it was like obvious what the narrative was going to be. With this, there were so many songs that when we started record them and see them like on the whiteboard that we had,
Mhm.
there was like zero context. But then as like things started getting eliminated and finished and swapped out, you just kind of saw this context like slowly naturally come together. That wasn't like a forced narrative. So I think that's why I'm like so incredibly proud of Heal, because it all the work that went into it, and then it just kind of naturally guided itself to being like a work that I'm really proud of. So I'm sorry for that long-winded answer, but
Listen,
yeah.
you have the floor. This is what it's for. Like, I want to like pick your brain. I love when I get to talk
Awesome.
to musicians that
Mhm.
have a lot to say.
Oh, I've got lots to,
I,
I can go on for 2 hours.
we got all the time in the world.
Great.
I was wanting to ask you, like, I mean, we'll backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
You said like in the 2 years time, I mean, I feel like there's so many bands, musicians, like during that time frame that were just like when this pandemic, no one can leave their house because we're all in quarantine.
Mhm.
And it's like you have nothing but time to kind of just you have to sit with your thoughts and
Yep.
you have to kind of either meditate on them,
Mhm.
grieve through them, work through them. Like, were there times where it was difficult to put pen to paper? Were
Oh
there
yeah.
where it was kind of like where it was easy, kind of like it flew off the tongue, like
Mhm.
certain songs? Like, tell me about that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There were, I mean, there were many times where, where you just walk into a room and like we had a little music room in our old house where I was doing all the demoing. And there's times I go up there and tell my wife, like, okay, I'm going to work on these songs I go and work up there for 3 hours. I close the door and just like stare at the computer and end up just watching YouTube videos for an hour because I can't like get myself into that headspace.
mhm,
But there were certain tunes, and it's funny because it's like whenever you go in with the attitude of like, I'm going to write a song, it's
mhm,
like you're almost guaranteeing that you're not going to finish it or you're going to get stuck. But if you kind of go in with the intention of like, I'm just going to go in and create just for the sake of creating, and even if it sucks, like it's still a worthy
exactly.
attempt.
Mhm,
And there were a couple songs that kind of started that way. There's the song Forever, which is the first song on the record. I mean, that came so super, super quickly because I think it was because it was right in the beginning of me starting to demo and write stuff. And I am not an audio engineer by any means of the word, but I could kind of guide myself around a digital audio workstation and figure it out to some extent. And one
mhm,
of my big things was like, how could I get some fucking drums? Like I want some drums, right?
yeah.
And I couldn't figure out how to get the software and this, that, the other thing. So I just found like an online, like free, like drum sequencer.
Mhm,
And it was just, I mean, it was horrible. It was awful, terrible, sounded like trash. But I just wanted something really simple, like a big, swampy, like slow marching kind of beat.
right.
And I found that beat, and then that song like literally wrote itself. I didn't guide it in any way. I didn't do anything. I just kind of recorded this drum loop and copied and pasted it for however long, the 4 minutes or 5 minutes that it is. And, you know, picked up a bass, and there was the riff and then the leads and everything. And then the words kind of just naturally started coming out. Like I was talking about in that song, I talk a lot about like just wanting to kind of be repaired.
Mhm,
Like I want to repair myself from the mess that Clear kind of left.
mhm,
And being that ended up being the first song on the record, it like guided the whole narrative of everything. But that one came super, super quick.
mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's the coolest thing about, I mean, I'm not a musician myself. I'd
Mhm.
love to be. I love playing with the guitar and doing little fun stuff, but I love
Sure.
talking to musicians and again, using the phrase picking their brains because I think it's so fascinating, like the process of it all, like the trial and the errors, like,
Hmm.
okay, does this work good? Does this sound good? Okay,
Hmm.
that one, maybe this one. And then when you find that right thing and it just like it takes you right where it needs to. I
Right.
That's the sickest thing.
Oh,
Um,
it's amazing.
what like there's certain tracks I want to like ask you about, like
Hmm.
Recorrect Everything, like
Hmm.
Heaven's Callback, those specific songs. Like what can you kind of like describe those songs to me, kind of like just pull me into like your narrative with those.
Yeah. So, I mean, for Heaven's Callback, so that's funny because musically, a lot of what I was doing when I was writing the demos was because I would get, like I said, I'd get stuck sometimes and not really know where to go musically. So I started giving myself like these little challenges of just like, well, dude, you love AFI.
Mm,
Like, why don't try to write an AFI song? And for the longest time, Heaven's Callback was called AFY. Like, why are you doing this, you
yeah.
idiot? And so if you kind of listen to it, like thinking that, it makes a lot more sense when you hear like the big group vocals and everything, the
Yeah, right.
choruses, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but as far as the narrative of that song, it's just like, you know, kind of can a lot of that stuff is stream of conscious, so it's not like, while some songs have a point, it goes from A to B to C to D, a song like that's more like stream of conscious, and like in certain parts of it you could hear like wanting to just like unlearn destructiveness, unlearn, not grief, but like dwelling in grief. Like you want to unlearn all of this, like this shit that you've kind of ended up in.
Mhm.
And you know, and also at the same time, kind of just feeling, rejected for wanting to be, you know, for wanting to kind of be a musician and live this kind of strange life as a musician. There's
Mm,
like little pieces of all that stuff in that song. And Recorrect Everything is truly just a like wanting to overall just be a better human being, you know? So,
yeah, awesome. Another thing that kind of just was going through my noggin, because
mhm,
in the span of like the 2 years, and this kind of trails into like what I've
yeah.
talking about prior, like in the span of like the 2 years of y'all making like the album till now, like what are some like big life lessons that you've learned and that
Mhm,
just carried with you and that you're still learning,
mhm.
like through all of that?
Well, I mean, through the record, we learned a lot through the record and through our last tour, because it just was, we encountered a lot of chaos when we were on the road last time. And
Mm,
and I think the biggest thing is respecting each other in
right.
the band, like we always had a really great relationship, the four or five of us, depending on who was in the band at the time. But I think the big lesson was just how important communicating is, and being really open with each other about, what we want to do together and what we don't want to do together.
Mhm,
Because you end up in scenarios where some all of a sudden some people don't want to be involved anymore, and
mhm,
it's just chaos.
mhm.
So that was a big life lesson, as far as while making the record. I think sometimes myself, like I had blinders on about making the record, and I wasn't paying attention to the needs and wants of people around me,
It's
which
that
I mean,
vision, it's the tunnel vision.
yes, 100%, 100, because I've just like got stuck in it. Like, this is the most important thing. Fuck everything else. But meanwhile, everything else is falling to pieces around my life. And like, so it's important to keep perspective. So the record definitely taught me that. And the record also taught me just and it sounds really cliche and silly, but to kind of stay the course at the same time. Like, you can do things, like if you believe in yourself. Like, that record there was nothing there were no songs. We just said, we're going to make a record. And then there were 60 songs, and there was 12, and now there's a record. And I mean, just that alone, to me, that the fact that artists in general can just like will these things into existence, or capture them from the sky, essentially. I just think it's an amazing thing, like beyond any sort of accolades or whatever. Like, I think at the end of the day, the biggest reward is just the fact that, like, we made this thing, and it's going to outlive all of us, and that's amazing. So,
Yeah, like music in some ways is truly like it's immortal, because I mean, like you said, it's gonna be there
mhm,
forever. I mean, y'all, I mean, I'm with you.
mhm,
50 to 60 songs that y'all you've written, that you've like
Mhm.
figured out, like, and then you trickled it down to like this awesome 12, 13 tracks. I mean, like that's, I can only imagine like the, okay, picking this song, it's you're
Mhm.
formulating like a child of some sort, and it's
It
just,
is absolutely.
and it's, I can only imagine like how proud and like how, the blood, sweat, and the tears that you put
Mhm.
into it, the endless hours. Like it's not something like you didn't do it for nothing. Like
Right,
it's
right, right.
cathartic. It's a healing,
Mhm.
like it's a healing process within itself to
Mhm.
create, you know, this, your music, and especially like with this within this album within itself. So
Mhm.
I love it. I want to
Oh,
dive
thank you.
back into being on the tour with Cold.
Yeah.
Um, like, do you have some favorite shows that y'all like? Did y'all have like any specific
Mhm.
destinations that you like were like memorable to you? Any specific moments? I'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when we were on the road, I mean, there were a lot of crazy. The crazy stuff was more so like oh shit, kind of crazy. There was no
Yeah.
you know what I mean. There was no
Right.
like whoa crazy. Like it was
Right.
more
Yeah.
so like the craziest stuff was getting like lose. I had lost my voice like a week. I don't know. It was a week into the shows. Just like nowadays I'm using in-ear monitors and they're super helpful, especially being one of the opening bands. Like we weren't rolling with the sound guy,
Right.
like every once in a while, Darren Cold, sound guy, who's a good friend of ours, he would run sound for us. But for the most part, we were kind of like left to whoever, whatever they had. And you only got so much time,
Right.
for sound checks and whatnot. So if you don't have the best sound coming out of your monitor wedges, you're going to blow your voice out. There's no getting around it. And I blew my voice out and it didn't come back for about a week and a half. And to have to get up in front of people
Mm.
and I'm the lead singer, like, but what was great about that, oddly enough, like speaking of like life lessons and like learning things like through through crazy times, like I kind of realized that so much of what you're doing, like the audience and the people, if they see that you're authentic and that you're sincere in what you're doing and the energy that you're putting out, it's like maybe your voice being a little rough around the edges or wild or a croak, like they're still kind of willing to hold you up, and that, so a big fear of mine was, oh, we're going to get booed and shit thrown at us. And then we went out there every night and everybody cheered and people came and talked to us every night and we made fans, and it all just reinforced the idea of like, when you're in a shitty spot and things seem like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You just kind of have to get out there and the show goes on and you do it and it'll be okay. It will be okay.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And as far as like great memories, I have, probably two shows in specific that we played. One, playing the Whiskey a Go Go in Los Angeles, just because, like I said, when I was making the first record and even when we were making Queer, like there was no part in my mind that was like, oh yeah, you're totally gonna go and be on tour and play the Whiskey and do all these things, and that's totally definitely going to happen. Like there was no part in my mind where that was ever going to happen, so to wind up playing at the Whiskey a Go Go and like Matt Pinfield showed up and just
Full circle.
bizarre.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah, so insane. And again, a lot of the country that we played, everybody was pretty accepting to us, and some people you have to win over more than others. But really, California though, it was like the East Coast and the West Coast, like they were cool with us and we were cool with them. Like they seemed to really dig what we were doing for the most part. And when we played the Whiskey, it was just like a magical show. And the other show was, I think it was the day before the Whiskey, I think. We played a place called Brick by Brick in San Diego, and it's this like little punk club. And this was the first show. I'm not going to go down this whole this long story, but our drummer, he prematurely just like left the band. We were in Arizona and he shit kind of went down and he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he left, right? So he left, and Tony, the drummer of Cold, was
Mhm.
like, hey, I'll play with you guys. And he had like, 7 hours to learn our whole set, and we were terrified because we're like, what are we gonna do? Like, this is crazy. This is absolute insanity. Well, at least we'll get a sound check. And we get there, and then they got
Mhm.
up there to do our sound check, and they got called for VIP. So Tony had to go. We didn't even get a sound check. And we
Yeah.
were like, oh man, this is fucked. Like, how, okay, well, you know what? It'll be a dead night. It'll maybe only like a couple people will be there. And it's like one of the most packed shows that we're gonna play. So it's like loss, you're losing. And we just said, fuck it, let's just see what happens. And we got out on stage, and Tony played with us like he had been playing with us for 10 years. And it was just, I mean, after that set was over, and I don't know if the audience could tell at all, but like we all like ran off stage, and it was like we were 15. Like we all just were like, oh my God, like screaming in the back room, like, Tony, you're amazing, like it was really, really crazy. So the Whiskey would be the second, would be the runner up, but Brick by Brick was definitely my favorite show.
I don't blame you because
No.
I stories like those rock my world because I can only imagine like, yeah, we gotta shoot the shit. We
Hmm.
gotta do it. You can't
Hmm.
not do it. Like you
Right,
are one of
right.
the leaders, so it's like, okay, we'll see what happens. And then
Hmm.
those moments like that come in to play when someone's like, okay, I'll step in, I'll drum, I'll play.
Yeah.
It's like great band chemistry. Things are flowing seamlessly
Hmm.
as they can and as they should.
Sure.
There's people in front of you. That's all that you want. Like you, because obviously no one wants to be booed. No one wants shit thrown at
Right.
them. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes like rock, dad rock, hard rock, whatever. Sometimes
Yeah.
they can not be the nicest, but sometimes they can
Sure.
also be like the most kind of like gracious. And
Oh, unbelievable. Their
like
their their
and
crowd was super
they,
willing
they
and
can
nice to
they
us.
can be just so like, you know what? We're gonna let
Hmm.
y'all in. We're gonna like,
Hmm.
and I mean, I saw y'all at Scout Bar in
Hmm.
Houston, and I was like right in the front, like just like with y'all, just like vibing. And
Uh-huh.
I had never like listened to y'all's music prior. And like, wow. I was talking to my friend Melanie. I was like, they're really good. I think they're set. They're really sick. And I
Oh,
could
thank
speak
you.
to y'all then. And
Hmm.
I'm really excited to see where y'all are headed very soon. I mean,
Thank
like
you.
y'all should definitely like bask in this, this era right now with like
Hmm.
having this great record of like,
Thank
going
you.
through, the ups and downs and the seven stages of grief, but then
Hmm.
kind of going through it all and finding some sort of light at the end of the
Hmm.
tunnel and healing.
Absolutely.
And one of the last questions is like one that people always ask at the end of interviews, like,
Hmm.
what is next? Is there future shows? Is there, record in the making? Like, what's
Hmm.
going on with University Drive?
Well, at the moment we have a big, at least a big local show that we've been kind of preparing for a while. And we wanted to do this at our album release party that we did, but we didn't want to alienate people, because when you put out a new record, most of the time, I don't know if you've ever, you see a band put out a brand new record and they do their release and they play the full record, which
Yeah.
is great. But the problem is you don't know the any of the songs yet. So you're
Yeah.
standing there, and so basically what we did for our release show was we played kind of for all the people who were there with us from the beginning. So they knew everything. We just kind of played the singles we had put out. For this show, though, we made it a point to be like, this is the show. We're going to play this record from top to bottom. We put a lot of time into it, and a lot of time into making sure that the songs sound right. They're a lot harder to reproduce live because it's the first time we even played them. Some of those songs were just recorded by me. Like some of those were just me, or just me and Ryan, or just me, Ryan, and our old drummer Steve. It wasn't like we all had to learn some of those songs together. Never even played them before. So that's the big show that's coming up next Friday in Oliphant, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, at a place called the Keystone Stage with a band called Estacota, who are awesome. You should check them out, Estacota, and the band Fosh, Fosh. They're a younger, newer band. They're great. They're awesome bands. And then we have some plans to do just some short tour runs, just University Drive, kind of getting back to the roots of like some DIY shows and I think we're doing like a 5 to 8 day run in January, some like a 3 day and a 2 day like weekend little thing. And then Angelo and I are trying to set up some acoustic like at house, like at home house concerts.
Those are the best.
Yeah, so if you know anybody that wants me and Angelo to come play at a house, let us know, because we really are we're trying to set up I think 10 to 12 days of that in March. So
Come down
yeah,
to Nashville.
we'll do it. We'll make it
Yeah.
happen. If we can make it work, the routing, we'll
Right.
do it. Yeah.
Dude, I am so hyped for you. Like, it's
Thank you.
such a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise.
Your music is on all streaming platforms, correct?
Yes. You can
Okay.
find it everywhere.
Awesome, guys. So you heard that. Stream University Drive, stream their latest album, Heal, and all of their discography. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you again, Ed.
Likewise.
Yes, stay safe, everybody. Wear a mask if you
Yes.
want to. If we're still in a pandemic, stuff is crazy, but love each other, be safe, and keep on rocking. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.